Hi, everybody. My name is Les Velez, and I welcome you to the OPUS interview series. OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that I co-founded in 1994. And our mission, simply put, is to help people having paranormal experiences. I'm the co-founder and chairman, and for more information on OPUS, please go to our website at opusnetwork.org. I am very happy and pleased to have with me today Lynn Monet. Lynn is the author of the book Omnipresent. Her story, along with the stories of 8 of the 13 witnesses that either eyewitnessed or experienced paranormal activity in her home. The remaining stories have been retold to the best of her recollection as they were told to her in the cases of witnesses that could no longer be found. Those names have been changed in her book. During the writing of her book, the manuscript was basically disappeared twice and had to be rewritten. Lynn was shocked at the lack of real help that is out there to deal with this kind of paranormal event that have occurred to her, and how expensive the help can be once the help is found, whether it works or not. There are no guarantees or refunds. If you suspect ghosts and have never been diagnosed with schizophrenia, you probably do. If your child tells you that they have seen something more than once, they probably did. Even though you can't see it, it is probably there. Believe it. Lynn, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, yeah, I am thrilled to have you. And, one of the things, Opus, I mentioned earlier off the air with you is the fact that for some reason we've been mainly focused on the alien issues, but there's other parts of the paranormal, and your story uh, is basically about ghosts. And so I'd love to hear, what started this whole thing for you. One day, something happened, and there you went.
Yeah, and just to also add into what you were saying, there is the alien side and the paranormal side, but we really don't know what's going to happen after we pass away, of which direction that's really going to take. So nobody's wrong here. It's just some of us are more one way than the other, but that doesn't make anybody's ideas or their impression of what it is wrong. So anyway, when I was a little girl, I was able to see interdimensional. Well, I call it interdimensionally, but we lived near a hospital, like in short blocks from it, and we used to have dead people with patients gowns walking through our house. The house that I grew up in was haunted, but as things went on, as I got a little bit older, my parents, my mother mainly due to their religious beliefs, were very, very embarrassed by not only my gifts, but my siblings' gifts as well. And of course, I was more verbal with mine, and my siblings learned to be quiet about theirs much quicker than me. So over the years, I was trained not to acknowledge that side of my abilities. So I just to speed up, I had gone through a divorce, and I was living, because my credit was ruined from the divorce, I was living in a single wide mobile home that was 20 years old, that I had to fix up and rebuilt my credit to the point that I could finally purchase a house. And I had been looking for a house for almost a year. And on my single person income, I was limited as to what I could afford, or if it was in my price range, it was either it needed a lot of renovations, or it was next to a dump, or somebody got murdered in the house behind me. So there were always these issues, that it's just it didn't work. I wasn't able to find something. But there was this one day that the realtor, after looking with me for a year, had called me, and she said, "This house is just getting ready to go on the listing. It hasn't been put yet. My colleague just came back from taking pictures of it. This house is in your price range, and it is," she said, it's but I forget the wording that she said. I'm sorry, I messed that up. So anyway, she said that it's too good to be true. That's what she said. And of course that should have resonated with me, and it didn't. So I was excited and I got ready. Within an hour, I went over to her office. And so we took a drive over to the house. And of course, I'm looking through these papers of this beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,400 square foot house, 2-car garage. I mean, you could have fit 3 cars in there if you pulled one in all the way. It was a split level house on an almost half-acre lot. And I call it a Florida flat lot because the land is very, very flat in Florida. And it's in North Carolina where the house was, you know, everything kind of has mountains and it's a little bit of hilly. And so it was a flat lot. And so I asked her, I said, are you sure? You know, this sounds like this house could sell easily for $100,000 more than what they're asking. And so we called, and sure enough, it was the correct price. And I'm like, okay, what is it, near a nuclear plant, or does the neighbors have a sinkhole in their yard? You know,
Right.
what is it? Something's got to be wrong here. And it was so perfect because supposedly the people had moved out. And had to be relocated for their work. And with that being said, the house was move-in ready. They were already gone. They didn't want to have to pay the 2 mortgages. They were, you know, motivated sellers. Yeah, they were motivated. All right. But so we pull, you know, as we're going through the neighborhood, of course, I'm looking to see, you know, what's the problem with this neighborhood. And house was on a dead end street. I mean, you couldn't get better than that. I wanted a house that was in what I call a trick or treat neighborhood, because I had kids where they could go door to door to door in a shorter distance and get lots of candy. But yet I wanted my privacy too. And this house had a huge acre lot behind it that was just all grass that somebody else owned, but of course it connected to mine in it. So I had this expansive, you know, privacy looking out off of the thing. But when we got to the house, when we finally pulled up to the house, I couldn't believe it was a brick house. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. As a matter of fact, the book that I sent you that's coming out, that is the front of the house. And so we went to go up to the door, and key pieces, the doorknob was always a problem getting it unlocked and opened. And then there were reasons, and I know that we have an hour on here, so I'm going to speed up with a few things, but
okay, we can go a little bit longer.
Okay. So the realtor and I walked up to the door, and it was these beautiful double entry doors. And of course, because it was a split level, you would walk into a foyer, and then you'd have the ascending stairs and the descending stairs. And she went to put the key in, and it wouldn't turn. And so she tried, and then she thought, well, maybe that they had left the wrong keys in the box because it was in a lock box. And it seemed like after she was ready to give up, the next time that she tried, now the lock turned. We were able to open the door, but then she wasn't able to get her key out of the lock. So she's kind of, you know, fussing with the key, trying to get it out. And I decided to go inside and ventured upstairs, just to the top of the stairs, to kind of look around. And so I get up as I'm walking off of the foyer up the stairs. In my peripheral vision, I catch the glimpse of a young man hanging in the stairwell. Now, this house was built in the 1970s. And one thing that I've learned since then is that it's not about the house. Brand new house can be haunted. It's about the ground that it's built on. You don't know what was there before the house was built. Right. So anyway, I went, you know, I caught that glimpse, and of course I looked directly at it, and there was nothing there. And I'm like, why on earth, you know, would I be thinking about something so horrible? You know, this is terrible. There's nothing in here. These people have moved out. So I just, you know, I went to the top of the stairs, and as I'm standing at the top of the stairs, I swear I felt like I was being charged by an angry bull, to the point that it came up on me so fast that I had to step back 1 foot on the stairs and grab the railing so that I didn't fall backwards. And I felt this like it felt like spider web going across my face, which of course, you know, I immediately was distracted by that and started brushing off my face, trying to get whatever it was that had landed on me. I was thinking brown recluse, and I didn't want to be bitten by it. So, and then I let the other thought go. I didn't think of it. So we went through the house, And the upstairs, and I mean, it had a huge family room downstairs with a stone fireplace, and it had a bonus, like a 13 by 15-foot bonus room with that. And then they had the 3 bedrooms and the 2 bathrooms upstairs. It had
Mhm.
breakfast nook. I mean, it was a nice house. And I was thinking, oh, as a single mom, and this is in my price range, I would be so proud, to provide this for my
Sure.
children. So
Absolutely.
I asked her if we could come back later on in the day, and I could bring my kids. I had the experience of, going to some houses that I kind of was interested in and asking for like a week to think about it. And of course,
Mhm.
in that price range, when I would go back, the house would be gone.
Gone.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I didn't want to do that with this one. This really was too good to be true.
Right.
So I came back that afternoon with my kids, and of course
How
they're
old were
running
you? How old were your kids at this point?
at the time. My son, let's see, my daughter was 13, and so my son was 7.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
anyway, so my son's running around the yard. He says, "Mommy, I love this house. Can we have this house?" Little 7-year-old. So anyway, when we finally, again, there was that problem with the lock, and finally when we got in, the kids, of course, ran down the hallway picking out their bedrooms and that sort of thing. And so I made mention to the realtor that I wanted to go ahead and make an offer, that I wanted to make sure that I got that offer in, and that
Yeah.
day, just in case. So lo and behold, she actually called to let them know that an offer was coming in, and someone else had already made an offer.
Mm.
So I said a little prayer. I'm like, please, if it's meant to be mine, then it's meant to be mine. I put all my faith in the Lord's hands. So lo and behold, as we're standing there doing that, my daughter walks up. They had come up, they asked if they could go downstairs. And I said, sure, go ahead. So they go downstairs, and they're back up in about 5 minutes. And my teenage daughter says, Mommy, I don't like this house. I do not want to move here.
Mm.
And I said,
Whoa.
at first I thought, what?
Why?
I was embarrassed, first of all, because I'm standing with the realtor who's
Mhm.
been dragging me around for a year. And here now my teenage daughter's coming up. Mommy, I don't want to live here. And I said to her, I said, what did you say? And she repeated it. And she says, there is something about this house that I don't like, and I do not want to move here. So, I'm thinking, well, 13-year-old, it hit her that she's going to be moving away from her friends, and she might have to
Mhm.
go to a different school. And I figured, we were moving in during the summer months. So, we would get settled in, and she would be okay. She'd realize that her friends are still only 25 minutes away. So I just basically said to her, well, this isn't a decision for you to make, and I'm going to make an offer on this house. I said, how could you not like this house? You could fit 4 of the homes that we're living in right now inside of this house,
Yeah.
And I said, big backyard. So I went ahead and I made the offer, and of course, obviously I got it. And as we move forward to the time of closing, the couple that sold the house to me also had 2 children, and they were late getting to the closing, which I found out in the second book why. So anyway, the woman, she wouldn't make eye contact with me, and I found that very odd. I went ahead and
Mm.
I signed all of my papers up front, but she kept sitting there just staring at her feet. And I mean, I'm kind of like cocking my head trying to
Yeah.
get into her view. And I
Right.
said, I said to her, I said, oh, I'm going to put wooden flooring in. And she says, that's what we wanted to do. Well, they come to find out they knew about the ghosts too, and
Mhm.
they were selling it to me. And so as things came up with the house, even little things that needed to be fixed, like changing a light bulb where they could have backed out, they fixed everything. I mean, they literally walked away from the table with a check for $800 for that
Mm.
house. And I to me, I was thrilled to have the house. So
Well,
we
usually in a lot of states, I mean, they have a law that if you do have ghosts, that you're supposed to disclose this, and they did not.
No, well, and in North Carolina, they don't have that. They have the
Eh,
law where you have to state whether somebody has passed away in the house or not, but
Okay.
they don't have the ghost disclosure. And really, they should, because a whole bunch of North Carolina is haunted. So it just they didn't have to disclose that part. And
Okay. Okay.
yeah, so I after the closing, we decided my kids and I to go over for our first dinner, and so I took taco makings over, and each of my kids brought a prized possession to leave in their room so that they could stake their ground. And I purchased the house the end of March, and I decided, I wanted to put the wooden flooring in. I wanted to do some renovations to it. So we were going to stay living in the single wide and let my kids finish out the school year while those renovations were being done on the
Right.
house.
Yeah.
And of course I had 4 different workers come through there, and 3 of them disappeared, never came back. And
jeez.
literally, and I'm kind of racing forward a little bit to step back. The very first day that we were over there, after I got the keys, of course, I went over, and the key gave me problems in the lock. And I'm like, you know what? I'm bringing the WD-40. I'm going to soak this lock. I didn't want to change the locks immediately because I had workers coming in the house. And since we weren't moving in there, I wanted to change the locks after everything was
Right.
done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so that very first night, I overheard my kids, they were playing their video games, and my daughter comes up to the doorway of the kitchen, and I'm preparing dinner, and she said, "What did you want?" And I said, I didn't call you. And she said, "Yes, you did." She said, "You called me twice and I answered you. So what did you want?" And I said, "No, my daughter's name is Brittany, or she's Brittany in the book." I said, I said, maybe, the lady across the street, maybe there's another girl on the street named Brittany, and she's calling her kid, for dinner. And I said, "But I didn't call you." And then my son comes, and he's peering in from underneath her arm, and he says, "Mommy, I heard you call her too." So both of them heard a voice that sounded like mine calling Brittany. So of course, my theory of there must be another Brittany on the street, that lives close by, and her mom might have been calling her home for dinner. They liked that idea. So they of course ran out into the front yard to try to, to meet this neighbor, and then of course they weren't there. So we left that day, and I dropped my kids off at school the next morning and decided to go back to the house. I was pulling up carpeting, single mom thing. I wanted a higher quality of wooden flooring. And I figured, so whatever work I could do myself, I wouldn't have to pay for. I could invest the money, in getting some better things. So I went over there by myself and had the WD-40 ready for that lock. And of course it worked pretty well. But when I went into the house and I went up the stairs to put my purse down, every single light in that house was turned on. Now, there was no furniture or anything, but every overhead light, the light inside of the oven was turned on. The light over the top of the stove was turned on. And I'm like, wait a minute, I did not turn these things on. Maybe somebody in the neighborhood was entrusted with a key, and they came over after we left and maybe turned the lights on, or maybe because we just bought it yesterday and it was on a Friday, and not a Friday, but Thursday, and the paperwork is being processed on Friday, that maybe another realtor came through earlier in the morning or after we left, So I went downstairs to unload my car. I had brought some boxes of things over to unload, and I noticed that the neighbor across the street was outside. So I decided I'd go over and introduce myself and ask if somebody was entrusted with a key. So I went over there. He said, "Hi, my name's Lynn. I just bought the house across the street. And do you know if anybody's been entrusted with a key to keep an eye on the house?" From what I understand, the previous owners were living out of state. And just to back up a little bit, another thing, in the closing, it turned out that they weren't living out of state. They had moved just 20 minutes away back in with her parents, and both of them were still working at the same job. So they didn't transfer out of state. So I don't know where that story came from with the realtor, but again, it was move-in ready. So I guess that's the only part that counted. But just to go forward, the guy stopped, he shook my hand, and he said, "Oh, hello." And he says, "Welcome to the neighborhood." And I asked him, I said, "We left last night." I said, did you notice any lights on in the house last night?" And he says, "Well, my wife and I took a late evening walk, and your lights were on in your walkway." And I said, "Yeah, but those are solar lights. They kind of go on."
Come on. Yeah.
Yeah. He says, "Yeah, I remember when the guy installed those." And I said, "Well, but were there any lights on the inside of the house? Because, I'm thinking maybe one of the kids did run back and leave a bathroom light on or something. But like the light over the stove was unusually tall. I don't even know if my 13-year-old could have reached it. You know what I'm saying? Without standing outside. And why would she want to turn that on?" So
right.
anyway, turned out that the lights were not in the house. So I went ahead, I continued to pull carpet. I left that day. I went to leave out the door to go pick up my kids from school. I made sure that all the lights were turned off this time. And, I locked up everything. And when I went to leave the front door, I had trouble locking the door. The deadbolt just would not turn in the frame of the door. So I finally had to open the door and do by the knob lock. And I turned the knob lock with my hand and I shut the door and I left. So the next day when I come back, I go to stick my key in the door and the door just opens.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I didn't turn the knob.
Yeah.
It just opens. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe the reason why was because I didn't have it pulled all the way in the door frame and I didn't lock right. But again, I went upstairs, I went to put my stuff down, and I'm giving you kind of a brief version of some of the stuff. But I had already pulled up all of the carpeting in the living room and dining room area. And since the house had been built in the 70s, the ceiling was kind of yellowed with time. And so I wanted to put a fresh coat of white ceiling paint on before the wooden flooring would be put in. So it wouldn't make a mess. So I go to open the back sliding glass door and it's opened. The key and everything, the little thing that you slip in at the top was pulled out and dangling at the side. And I thought, okay, maybe I did not check that well enough. Maybe I did that. So then I'm going down the stairs to the garage to open the garage to haul in some more box. And the double garage doors were open. They weren't open, they were unlocked. And I thought, well, I'm not used to the manual doors. I always have that little clicky thing in my car, so maybe I didn't turn them the right way and I unlocked them instead of locked them. But in that same room, there was a workshop and there was a regular door like you would put on your front door to walk in. And I had, from the day before, bringing loads of stuff, had boxes stacked up against that door, at least chin level high for me and about 3 feet out. So when I looked at the door and I noticed that the chain on the door was dangling on the side of the door, I'm like, wait a minute, there is no way. I remember that was locked. There is no way. The only way that could have been unlocked is if somebody came in here, pulled all of the boxes out of the way, and then put them back after they unlocked the door. So they had to be on the inside of the house. So off to the neighbor's house I go again. I'm knocking on their door. And I made mention, I said, did you notice any kids in the yard? Or, I left like at about 2:30, 3 o'clock yesterday. Did anybody come by the house afterwards? Again, this house, the papers are just being filed. I'm technically not even the owner yet until all of that goes through. And they said, no, that they hadn't noticed anybody in the yard. And I said, well, here's my phone number. If you do, I'm going to start having things delivered to the house for flooring and new furniture for my children's bedrooms. And here's my phone number. I can be here in 25 minutes. So if you notice somebody in the house and my car is not here, I want you to call the police. Then call me and I will be on my way. And they agreed to do that. So I went in, finished up my day, walked through the house, made sure that everything was locked. Everything was all water was turned off. Everything was locked. The lights were off. Yep. Everything. My stuff was cleaned up. I didn't, took my trash out with me. So, not to draw bugs or anything. And I left, and knowing that I was going to be coming back again the next day, the next morning. So the next morning I drive up there. I've got the paint with me to start painting the ceiling. And I carry it up and put it on the counter in the kitchen. And I can hear this loud it was snoring. It was like snoring, like rhythmic snoring, but it was so perfectly high and low that nobody could snore that perfectly. So I was thinking maybe the pan under the refrigerator's rattling, maybe somebody's running a weed eater, but it went up and down. But I thought, just in case, there might be some squatter in my family room. And if it is, that could be who was turning on and off the lights and unlocking the doors. So I went and I got my son's baseball bat, which was his prized possession that he left in the bedroom. And I had my phone out and I had 911 dialed in with my finger on the button to push. I opened up the double entry doors thinking that the neighbors will be here faster than the cops, because either I'm going to be screaming or the person's going to be screaming because I'm beating the daylights out of them with my bat. So I go down there and at the very, very bottom of the stairs, it was very dark because to your right, you had the doorway opening to that bonus room, which did not have a window in it. Straight forward was the huge family room that had a very small window in it. And then to the left was the door that would lead out to the garage. So I'm standing in that section, just trying to reach and flip the switch on as fast as I could with my hand. And as soon as I did, the noise stopped. It stopped completely. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So I'm standing there, not even thinking that I can't even swing the bat to hit somebody in the little cubicle area I was in, but I didn't care. I was going to figure it out if I needed to hit somebody. But I was waiting to hear like joints cracking or material rubbing together, somebody moving or yawning something, and there was no sound. So I'm thinking, oh my God, they're in the family room. And now that, because this light has been turned on, they're aware that I'm, coming in there. So I went ahead and I flipped the light on really, really quick and drew my hand back and dropped my phone. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to bend over to get that phone, because if somebody comes running out of that room at me, then they could jump right on top of me and they'd have advantage. So I peeked around the corner, and of course there was nothing there in either of the rooms. So I just kind of chalked it up to it being a new house, and that there must be, some gurgling pipes for the sewage system or something. But it was just that snoring was perfect. I mean, it would go high and then low and then high and then low. But then again, it stopped after I turned the light on. And so I went upstairs and started painting. I stopped and sat at the stairs just for a minute, and I said a little prayer to myself. I'm like, oh, thank you that nobody was there, because it was scary for me. And I'm, thinking that somebody would be there, but yet it would have made sense for the reason why all of the lights and the stuff were being left on. So I went ahead and I started painting. And that day I picked up my kids, and they're like, when can we have a sleepover at our new house? When? So I went and I bought 2 queen size blow up mattresses, and we went back the next day to have a sleepover. And my daughter wanted to invite her best friend. It was on a school night, to come along, who was also named Brittany. So we've got the 2 Brittany. And I blew up a mattress for them. And then my son, he shared one with me. He's 7 years old. So that was, still in that range that it was okay to do that. And so we slept in another room, but the girl that had come to spend the night, the friend, I'll put the friend so we don't confuse the Brittany's. She was awake like at 2:00 in the morning, and she wanted to go home. She did not want to stay there. Actually, it was 3:00 in the morning, but she had been up before to go to the kitchen to get some Oreos, and something scared her in that kitchen so bad that she ran back to get my daughter, and she said, I don't want the Oreos anymore. She didn't even get them out. Something spooked her badly. And she wanted to go home then, but my daughter kept trying to coerce her to stay, type thing. And finally, 3:00 in the morning, they're in my room. I want to go home. So I let her call her parents. Of course, her parents didn't want to get out of the bed 3:30 in the morning, drive 25 minutes, and neither did I. So we finally convinced her to just stick it out until morning. If she didn't want to go to sleep, she didn't have to. She could sit up wide awake if she wanted to. But as long as, we just had to get to that morning. And so the morning came, and we went ahead and we left. And of course, that girl never wanted to come back to that house ever.
Did she ever say what she saw, or
she didn't,
what spooked
but
her?
yeah, she did not. But when things started to amp up really bad, that I could no longer be in denial about it, was the second sleepover. And I owned the house for 8 months, and the house was haunted so badly that I was never able to move in. I never moved into the house.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how bad it was. So the second night that we went, I brought my dog along. I had a little black schnauzer named Sally, and brought her along, and she did not want to come into that house. And my daughter, even after what she had said, she was trying to make the best of it because she didn't have any choice at that time, so she wasn't saying much about it, but the dog did not want to go in the house. So I thought, well, maybe she's got to go to the bathroom, and I let her, go in the front yard and tether to a pole. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to just say that you did not move into the house at all. Just
No,
never moved in.
Well, I had some new furniture put in there, and I did move some of my furniture into there, but I had it all brought right back out.
Wow. And so
Yeah.
what'd you do? Go back to the one wide, as you
Yes.
said? Oh, goodness.
Yes, I had sold that. I had 30 days, and I had to renege on it
Mhm.
2 weeks before the closing. And
Yeah.
fortunately, it worked out well because they ended up finding a place that was closer to where they wanted it to be, and they weren't going to have to move mine. So
Wow.
they were going to have to move mine. So it worked out okay, and we ended up going back there.
You know, it's interesting what the dog, they're so sensitive, animals in general, cats,
Mhm.
dogs, that we have around, when they start acting weird, you got to pay attention. You got to really pay attention.
Well, and that when your kid walks up and says to you, there's something wrong with this house, that's also a clue. So the two together were definitely clue. But the thing is at that point, I had already signed the deal. I now
Yeah.
had mortgage payment on that. So come, what or high water. I mean, I had no choice but to make it happen or sell it. So anyway, the second night that we did the sleepover, I had already started painting the ceiling. I had the carpet pulled out. I wanted one room finished. I was tired of walking into unfinished rooms. So I picked the master bathroom because it was small. I'm like, I can do the ceiling and the walls in a couple of hours on this one and be done, good to go. So I went in, and I went in, my kids drug their mattresses into the master bedroom and lined them up. They had a little TV in between with a VHS player. They were watching Hidalgo. And I had the windows open. And I had low fume paint. So I was painting the bathroom, and I finished up, and it was around 11 o'clock at night. And I came out and went into the kitchen to rinse out my paintbrushes and clean up. And as you would leave the kitchen, on your right-hand side, there was wrought iron railing that would prevent you from falling into the descending stairs. Because you had, from the foyer, you had the descending stairs and the ascending stairs.
Right.
So as I'm getting ready to pass that part out of my peripheral vision, I see this horrific thing coming up from those lower stairs. It shot across the double entry doors and went straight up in front of me where I was standing on the landing, and shot down the hallway towards the master bedroom where my kids were sleeping. And I stood frozen. This thing was a demon, and it was horrific. It literally, it stood on its haunches. It looked kind of wolf-like, with the skin just kind of hanging over the bones, but yet it had a narrowed end to its face, and narrates like a horse. So it had large, hole openings on the end of it. And it scared me so bad. And it had ears like a rabbit, but they were turned backwards, like on each side, like the FTD man, and they were grazing over its shoulder. It was kind of hunched, had like shorter arms with nasty nails, and the feet were moving so fast underneath it that you could just see the fluttering underneath it. And I stopped in my tracks, and I'm like, I am seeing things. A motorcycle must have gone underneath the light outside and made that shadow, because not all the windows had dressings on them. But to think about it, coming up from another level, there's no way that could have happened. But anyway, all of a sudden I hear my dog at the end of the hallway, and she is growling. She is ferociously growling. So of course that immediately caught my attention, snapped me out of my frozenness. And I went down the hallway to see what she was growling at. And when I walked into the doorway, she was fixated on that door. She was standing there. Her hair was up on the back of her neck. And I've never seen her do that before, because there's never been a need. And she was ferociously growling. And I kind of pet her on her head to calm her. And she put her ears up for a minute and then put them back again, and then put them up, and was growling intensely on this thing. And I thought, well, I don't see anything. I'm kind of ignoring my sensory at that point in time. I'm coming down to see what the dog, because there's nothing there. I mean, I'm looking, there's nothing there. So I take the dog out, dog gives me a hard time coming in again. But finally, when she did, she runs in and she nestles in between my two kids and their mattresses. So then I crawl in with them too. And the next morning we wake up and my daughter says to me, I'm tired. I said, well, how did you sleep? And she said, I didn't. I felt like something was standing in the doorway the whole night staring at us while we were sleeping. And
Wow.
yeah, so that was and my son had bite marks on his legs, like animal on 3 places. He had bite marks that looked like dog bite marks, but the mouth was smaller than my schnauzer's mouth, so it couldn't have been her. And she wasn't prone to biting anyway. But
Right.
he had a bite mark on his calf and just above the back of his knee on one leg, and on the front of his leg on the other, on the thigh area. And when he woke up, I asked him, I said, Austin, you've got bite marks on your legs. What happened? I don't know. I said, did Sally bite you? He says, no. I said, were you playing with your dinosaur? I thought, the dinosaur has a plastic mouth and,
Yeah.
type thing. But the dinosaur wasn't even with us, and they happened and he had taken a bath the night before and had on his little short Bob the Builder or whatever it was, pajamas. So, I had clear view of his legs and I would have noticed it, and they were purple, and they had the imprints of the teeth. And I'm like, this is after seeing what I saw and then having him. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you saw this demon, how big was it?
I'm 5'9", and it was just a little bit shorter than me on its haunches. So I would say about 5'7", but it was up on its haunches. It wasn't on all fours. That's why there was the fluttering effect underneath its legs. So things, evolved. And so now I have finally seen this demon in the house. So I still, I go to work. I'm away from the house for a while. I was working a Baylor shift as a nurse on the weekends, and my kids would stay at my mom's house. And I'm, so you kind of walk away from, you kind of start to question yourself, like, did that really happen? And no, that house is so wonderful, it can't possibly be that. And and if it is, there are ways to get it out type thing. So I went to work that weekend and then went back, to the house with one of the workers that I was trying to hire to come in and do some of the work. And of course, he came to put the wooden flooring in. And so he came. I go over the next day. The wooden flooring's not installed. I call him. He says, I had another job to go to. Then the second guy, I go after he's supposed to put the wooden flooring in, and he had somebody in the hospital. He at least started with 2 pieces in my son's room. And then the third person was actually a friend of mine's cousin. So I was able to find out what was happening in the house. And so he and I were in the house together. And I want to back up just a little bit. At that point, I still hadn't said anything, to my kids. My kids weren't saying anything to me. So we weren't like comparing notes, but my kids had been seeing things. So just to move forward, so this guy, I was in the hallway. I was putting paint on the walls and getting it ready. And he was in the bedroom just on the opposite side of the wall in my son's room. And all of a sudden I see this young man walking up the stairs into my house.
Oh,
and I thought to myself, what on earth did? And so I turned, and it was so real that I turned and I said to the young man, I said, did you knock? And the guy in the room thought I was talking to him. He says, no, I just might have dropped something or bumped something.
Oh,
and,
no.
And so here I am, I'm seeing this young man. He had on denim blue jeans. He had on a white Oxford shirt. His face looked like either he had horrible acne or that it was sunken in. He had brown hair, kind of 80s style, hair parted down the middle. And then when I looked directly at him, he disappeared, but yet I could still see like the waffling. There was like vapors, almost like gasoline vapors. They kind of look like sometimes.
Yeah.
Direct. So I was leaving to go get my kids. At that point, I'm like, okay, we have a ghost in the house. So I couldn't deny it anymore. So that particular day, I left to go pick up my kids, and I get a call from the guy, my friend's cousin, in the bedroom, and he says, I've got to leave. I can't stay here and finish this. I'll come back when you're here. And I said, is something wrong? And he's like, there's something weird about this house, and I've never experienced anything like this before. And then the line dropped.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and so, and I couldn't
Oh,
get a hold of him and couldn't get a hold of him. And finally, about an
yeah.
hour later, I call him and I said, what happened? And he's like, oh, nothing. I just would rather be there when you're there. So, and then, and of course, and then he never came back either. But I found my
Wow.
friend who I worked with, and I asked her, I said, you know, I'll, I said, well, you asked your cousin what happened, why he left, you know,
Yeah.
and didn't finish the job. I said, you know, he tried to tell me that his cut, that he needed to get a cutter in order to do the cuts on the wooden flooring, but yet he had a cutter in the back of his car. And I'm thinking, you know, he was kind of young. Maybe he just needed the money up front so he could get a blade or something. But, you know, I rationalized it. But at this point, you know, I couldn't anymore. And she told me that she would ask him. So July comes, and her cousin's over at her house, and he's had a couple of beers, so he's feeling a little happy. And she asked him, she said, what happened at Lori's house? How come, Lynn's house? Why didn't you go back and, you know, finish the job? And he said, I feel so bad. He says, she is such a nice lady. He said, but that house is words that I can't say on this radio show. It starts with an F. But anyway, he said, and he says, I could not go back there. He told her, he said that he had a little garden seat that he would sit on and kind of roll with the wheels with it. And he had his mallet and his trowel and a block of wood, so that because it was tongue and groove flooring with adhesive.
Right.
And so he said that at one point that he had gone to put a piece in, and he reached for his mallet and the little block of wood, and they were gone. And he thought, well, you know, maybe I rolled over them. So he scooted, and of course they weren't there. And when he turned and he looked, they were lined up, paralleling each other right by the door. They had lined themselves up. And he's like, wait a minute, you know,
Wow.
I didn't get up and I didn't
Yeah.
go there, but you know what? They are there. And so at first he thought that I had come back and that I was playing a joke on him.
Oh,
So he got up and he started calling out into the hallway for me, you know, thinking that I was there. He was spooked at that time. So he went ahead and he turned on the overhead light, and he had this battery operated transistor radio thing with him, or one with the big boom box thing. And so he decided to turn that on to have some music. And he said that within a few seconds after he sat down and he brought his tools and he put them back next to his seat, that within like 30 seconds after that, the light shut itself off, then the radio shut itself off, and he can hear the tools dragging behind him, and they lined up in the exact same position in front of the door. And he said they couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Right.
So, yeah. So the thing about this house is it had these elongated windows. They weren't the normal kind. They were the kind that you had a crank to open, not to up and down.
Yeah.
And so you had to have these very odd shaped air conditioners to put in them. And we had one in there to help dry the floor. And he was supposed to take it out when he left. Well, he left in such a hurry that he left the air conditioner in the window. And so I had to go back to the house, because he's like, oh, well, I said, did you pull in the wind? Did you pull in the air conditioners? And he's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, oh, great. Because there was a whole area above the air conditioner that was opened that bugs could come flying in the rain. And I was working that weekend, so I wasn't going to be coming back until that Monday. So I asked my neighbor if she would mind going with me, and she didn't mind. And as we're driving over there, and I said, look, I said, I'm going to tell you, I said, do you believe in ghosts? And she says, oh, hell, yeah, I believe in ghosts. And I said, well, good, because I think that I've got one in the house. I said, so I appreciate you going with me. You don't have to go in if you don't want to. I just need to get the air conditioners pulled in from the windows. And if you're not able to, help me, I'll have the neighbor's husband across the street to see if he'll come and help me. She says, oh, no, it's no problem. I'll go ahead and go in with you. So we got there. And again, that lock thing is a problem, which that lock thing, there were two demons and a young man, the man that had hung himself in the house, actually did happen. It was verified by the next door neighbor. The owners built the house in the 70s, and it was their son. They were going through a divorce, and he did in fact hang himself in that stairwell, and the mom came and found him. So when Ellen and I got to the house, finally I got the door open. She's now standing in the foyer on the landing, and she's waiting for me, and I can't get that key out of the lock. And she said to me, well, you're not going to leave me standing here and let the boogeyman get me. So they targeted her. They don't let, demons, don't mock them, tell them to leave, but don't mock them, type thing. And they literally targeted her. And I'm telling you, I have 3 children. I would fight God for my children. If I can't imagine any parent that would not, if you were going to have your child taken away,
Sure.
and I swear on my children's lives, what I'm telling you is the truth. So, and people can believe it or not, but this was so unbelievable. My friend and I, we were in the kitchen. We pulled in the air conditioners and secured the windows. But my oldest daughter wanted to have a wild horse theme in her bedroom. So I wanted to show Ellen these really cool hand-carved Morgan horse heads that I had gotten to drape her valance over her windows of her bedroom with, to tie in the horse theme. And Ellen was holding one in each hand. And I'm standing next to her, and I can hear this buzzing, gurgling sound. It kind of sounded like a didgeridoo. It's that wah 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 wah.
Yeah.
But staticky. And I had heard it once before in the house when another incident with it, one of the other demons had happened. But I'm hearing this noise, and I'm not saying anything because I think that I'm the only one that can hear it. And she says, what's that sound? I said, you can hear that? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, you remember I told you that there's a ghost in the house? Look, I just want to show you this, and then we're going to go ahead and go. She started screaming. She said, oh my God, it's hot on my back. She says, what is it, a spider bite? And she's very large. She was a very large woman, about 300 pounds. So she couldn't even reach her bra strap to fasten. She had to have her husband do it. But anyway, and she's like, what is it, a spider bite? So she's trying to pull her shirt around to see if something's on her. So I pulled her shirt up and back, and she had a 4-inch claw mark between her shoulder blades, underneath that bra connection part of the bra, on her back. And being a nurse, it was a fresh wound. It was actively welting and beating blood. If you're in the medical profession,
Wow.
Even if that is an initial response to a fresh wound, even if you pick a scab off, it never welts like that again. And the claw mark looked like a single cat scratch. It was that thin. So, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, well, what did you do? Did you maybe scratch yourself on the car window getting out the corner of it? Or did you back into anything? What happened? Because it's welting right in front of me. And she starts screaming again. And she says, it got me again. It got me again. And she then had another claw mark underneath her belly button off to the left-hand side of her stomach. And that there was like a foggy mist that was kind of coming into the room. It was like from floor to ceiling, like a wall. And I told her, I said, listen, just go to the car. I will lock up. I said, just go to the car. So she went ahead, and she went to the car, and I, left for the car too. I didn't mess with the deadbolt because I didn't want to get the key stuck and have to get stuck there. And I figured at that point, anybody that wants to come and break into this house can take care of itself.
Oh yeah.
So,
Oh my goodness.
So,
Wow.
so I ended up driving her home, and that was one of the worst things that had happened. I mean, I finally at that point went home that evening, and I started going through the yellow pages. I'm looking for paranormal groups. I'm looking for churches. And the very next day when I got up, I started going through the list of contacting the churches to help me. And everybody referred me to the Catholics, or I had a few people that would say to me, oh, well, if you were going to our church, this wouldn't be happening to you. Click, hang up on me, And so, and I realized, it's like, what your slogan is, what would Jesus do? Jesus would have helped me, but I understood that they didn't know what to do either. This is, so they all referred me to the Catholics. And of course, I contacted all the way up to the Catholic diocese in Charlotte, and I spoke to the Archbishop, and he said that they rarely do exorcisms anymore. and it all on people for that part, but they rarely do them on homes too. So I kind of hit a dead end with that. But I had had a friend that was a Baptist, not Baptist, I'm sorry, Presbyterian minister, that I had met a year before. And so I contacted him because I'm like, I have to contact somebody that knows me, that knows that I'm not some kind of a crazy nut,
You're right. Sure.
type of thing, that knew me well enough. And I told him the story. He believed me, and he had a friend that was a Catholic priest.
Mhm.
So he said, let's go see a colleague of mine. He said, we were in school together. So we went to see this Catholic priest, and it just so happened that he was getting ready to move out of the office and being transferred to somewhere else in North Carolina. So he then connected us up with a third person as a go-to person. But in the meantime, I had gotten this call back from this Episcopalian minister that was a member of the Georgia Paranormal Group. And his name was Andrew Calder, and he has since passed away. May he rest in peace. But and he agreed to come out after I sent him pictures of the house,
Mhm.
to come out and help me. And as a matter of fact, the Presbyterian paid for it with his church money. So, because he told me, he said, when I went to my church to mention your problem, he says, I was more afraid of the Bible thumpers than I was about the things in your house. So, yeah. So anyway, so he came out together with the Presbyterian minister, and they were all blessing the house. It took the whole day. While we were there, I got attacked. I felt this hot lash, like it's just this hot lash blade. I felt like they cut me to the bone, and I covered the area, and I was holding it. I thought for sure if I let go that I was going to see blood gushing out.
Mhm.
And when the Episcopalian priest when Andrew came over, he put the cross over my hand that was on top of it. And of course the pain immediately stopped. So, but I was the weak link at that point, because here I am with a minister and a priest. So, they go after the person that's the least, the most powerful, I guess, in that situation. So they did the clearing, and they did the blessing and all of that. And I was told that it was okay to go back into the house. And of course, after you have something like that done, they kind of hide for a while. They want you to think that they're gone, but they don't stay hidden for long. And they have to regroup from that and rebuild, because they feed off of negativity and things like that. And of course, they didn't get a lot of that that screaming kind of moment in my house would have even made it worse. But they'll come back, with a vengeance. So after all that was done, I was told that I could bring, my children back into the house, and I did. I brought the children back over, and the cover of this book is an actual event that happened in the house. My son, when I'd gone over to mow the grass, was sitting in the master bathroom on the toilet, and that is what he saw coming in at him from the toilet. And to this day,
Wow.
my son is now 23 years old. He was 7 at the time. He will not sleep without the light on at night. This house traumatized him so bad, and we didn't even live in it, that he to this day will not, and he'd probably be telling on him, but it affected him that adversely. So I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to ask, as far as, so you basically, now you've got two houses, you've got the single wide, and you got this house. And
Mhm.
so now what's your next step? You've cleared the house supposedly from these things. What's the next thing that happens?
Well, the house was cleared. And of course, at that point, I had someone put a deposit on my single wide, because I had, they said it was okay. I put it up for sale by owner. And so the plan is to continue the renovations and to move in. So the one day that I went over to mow the grass myself, I brought my kids along, and I had another little friend for my son named Zachary that came along too. And they were climbing in a tree outside. And all of a sudden, Zachary comes down the stairs, the descending stairs, into the garage where I was putting gasoline into the lawnmower, and he's holding his neck to the side, and he's like wincing, like something was really hurting him. And I said, what happened? And he said, I don't know. It just hit me. And he said, and he was holding it. I said, let me see. And I took his hand away and there was like nothing there, no redness or anything. But he kept holding it. And then all of a sudden he started to retch. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a huge sign right there. So because I asked him, I said, did you get poked with maybe a branch from the tree? He says, no, I was coming down the stairs and it just hit me. So I took him to the car, got him into the car. I called the kids. I said, it's time to go. Shoved the lawnmower back in there. Of course, my son has to go to the bathroom. I'm like, go outside, don't go in the house, and then go to my car, find someplace private. And I called my daughter. Well, my daughter didn't hear me say not to come down those stairs because those rooms in the lower area is where the demons, that was their main place to hang out. So my daughter comes down the same stairs that Zachary did into the garage, and she gets to the bottom stair and she's like, ah, and it was her ankle. And she's kind of stumbling into the garage, almost, trying to hold her ankle and walk and almost falling over, almost on all fours. And I said to her, I said, what happened? She said, I don't know. She said, but when I got to that last stair, it was like something cut through my ankle. She says, and it's burning and it's burning. And so I got her into the car. And of course, little Zachary's still so nauseated, but he's not retching anymore. And I load them up. We get into the car. I, take off out of the driveway and get to the end of the street. And as the farther away that we got, the symptoms subsided from them. So I contacted the priest and contacted the Presbyterian minister. And I said, look, those things are not gone. My children were attacked by them today, and a friend of theirs was attacked by them today. I said, those things are not gone. So the Episcopalian priest said, well, maybe we need to do another clearing. And I said, there's no time. And he said, well, contact then the Catholic priest that the Presbyterian minister connected you up with. So I called, got the Catholic priest, went and picked him up, brought him over to the house. I was telling him about a little bit of what was going on in the house. That poor man was so nervous when he got into that house that he was shaking so bad, because I took him down to the lower levels first, and you could literally see the demons leaving through the ceiling up to the upper levels when he started to do his blessing.
Wow.
Literally, he was shaking so bad that he almost dropped his Bible. So he literally, this man went down the hallway, he went up the stairs, flinging the holy water, reading scripture, went down the hallway to my children's bedrooms, did not even enter the bedroom, squirt the holy water in from the door. He was ready to leave in like 20 minutes. Now, in comparison to the last day, this guy was ready to go. So we got into the car, and that poor man did not speak. And I'm not laughing because it's funny, but I remember seeing him get out of my car. He did not speak one word to me the whole way back. And when he went to get out of my car, he almost stumbled and fell on the ground. He could not wait to get back and get away from me and get away from the car. And I'm not laughing at him, but it's just, so of course, knowing what I know now and knowing how they feed on the negativity, his being there to bless the house, because it was so obvious that he was frightened. They fed on that, which makes it worse. You know what I'm saying? It does. It was just one thing after another. So I met up with the Episcopalian priest again, and it was over the phone. It wasn't a meetup. And I told him, I said, look, I'm selling the house. I said, I can't have peace of mind there. Your house is supposed to be your haven, and I can't live in peace at that house. It's one thing having to deal with criminals at large. But it's another thing as a single mother to have to deal with things that you can't see. Your kid comes to you in the night and says, there's something under my bed or in my closet. They might really have something under their bed or in their closet, or even worse, in their bed. And they come to huddle in with me, and I can't save them while the covers are being pulled off. So, there was no way that I was going to put my children through that. As a mother, there was just no way. And so I told him that. I said, nope, I'm done. I said, he said, no, you have to stand up. You have to command them to leave. You have to, state your ground. That is your house. I said, look, I'm envisioning having Thanksgiving dinner with my extended family over. And what if I see one of those demons walk through the room? Because I had seen them so many times in the house. I was desensitized to them. For one, they didn't scare me anymore. And
Right.
I could pick them out. You know what I'm saying? I could see them standing there. So, I told him, I said, there's just, I can't imagine having to stand up at the Thanksgiving dinner that I'm serving and commanding a demon to leave in front of all of my guests who aren't going to stay there very much longer than that. I said, and not only that, they're not going to want me to come to their house because I might be bringing more along with me than chocolate
Yeah.
cake.
Sure.
So so I ended up then reneging on the people that wanted to purchase the home, which I think I've mentioned to you before, that it worked out better for them. And I ended up staying in the single wide. I had the renovations finished up. I finally found a guy, the fourth guy, who was stoned all the time. So he carried his Archon, his demon on his back already, and they didn't bother him because he was already part of the team. But he did beautiful work. He did get the job done and hauled all of my stuff out of that house back to where I was living. And of course, I lined everything up in the yard. I read everything about, clearing the demonic contamination. So everything got squirted with holy water and salt before I would bring it in the house, because I surely didn't want to bring any of that home with me. And it was that house, because I wasn't having that issue where I was living.
Right.
And as it was, and because people were like, well, it must be you. Some of the churches that I called, they knew I was a single woman, and they would assume that I was being promiscuous. So immediately the blame came on me. And I'm like, look, it's not me. It's not where I'm currently living. It's that house.
Right.
And sure enough, it was. I had many, many denominations of religion come in there. People the go-to is Catholic, but the Catholics aren't doing as much as they used to anymore. And not only that, they are human. And in the case of mine, it made it worse. So, I actually, when I put the house up for sale, do we have more time?
Yeah. Go ahead.
When I finally put the house up for sale, I put it up as a for sale by owner. And I had a couple call me that had children, and they were like, oh, well, I used to live in this neighborhood, and a house just like that. I would love to raise my kids in that neighborhood. Can we come over and see it? And at first I didn't know that they had children. So they made an appointment to come the next day. And my mother and I were over at the house, just doing finishing touches on it, making sure the toilet was clean and everything was, good to go for people to come in and start looking at it. And so the very next day, my mom and I are coming an hour early because we brought some things along with it to do some staging with, so that, like towels, kitchen. And my mom looks up to the window and she said to me, she said, did you tint the windows? I'm like, no, why? And I looked up at my daughter's upstairs bedroom window. She had vertical blinds in there, but you couldn't see the vertical blinds. And I'm like, well, maybe they were pulled all the way to one side. And then I looked down at the lower level at the garage, and the window was covered in flies. You could see the flies on the downstairs window because they weren't fully covering the window, but they like a sheet of black paper on those upstairs on every single window. So I'm like, oh my God, those are flies. And so my mom and I were preparing. Here we have these people coming in an hour.
Sure.
The windows are covered in flies. We went up to the door expecting to be swarmed, but all of the flies were plastered all over the windows because they wanted out too. So we had to go opening the sliding glass door, opening the front kitchen window, taking off the screens. There were 3 windows side by side in the breakfast nook area, and the handles were broken to crank. So they were basically painted shut. And there was nothing wrong with their screens that were in place. And there were flies between the panes and those screens. And I don't know how they got there because there were no rips, there was no holes. These were full grown, big fat flies. There were no evidence of maggots, hatchlings, nothing. And they, of course, had excrement speckled all brown around the frames of the windows and everything. I had to take the screens off of those windows and usher those flies into the house in order to get them out of the kitchen window. And lo and behold, the people called and had asked to reschedule. And of course, I didn't get that message because I was frantically trying to get this
Mhm.
flight until after the fact. And so the first appointment, I made the mistake of making the appointment in the house where all of the beings that, that were there could overhear. And I think that's what happened. I mean, there was no garbage in the house. There were no
Mm.
clean, there nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing to draw those kinds of flies into that. And I mean, it was every window upstairs. They were covered. There were millions of flies in that house. And again, they weren't swarming us. They were swarming the windows. They wanted out. So when I rescheduled them to come back the next time for their visit, to come and see the house, and it was for the next day. And this time my mom and I went over 2 hours early to make sure that we didn't have that bug problem again. And of course, this time there was no problem. There was nothing there. And the people showed up and they brought 2 of their 3 kids with them. And it was kind of deja vu in the sense that there's the kids are running down the hallway the same way that
Mhm.
my kids were running down, picking out bedrooms. And then they came up to their parents and, can we go down and look downstairs? And lo and behold, they came back upstairs in about 5 minutes and they both looked like a deer in headlights. And I heard the little girl say to the boy, I'll take the small room. Tommy can have the creepy room downstairs.
Oh, jeez.
So in that moment, I realized that they saw them too. And as a mother, I could not, I was in a position that I couldn't afford to pay for the house and let the
Right.
demons live there. I would have liked to have bashed it down to the ground, and
Mhm.
no crossings, nobody go on his own. But I wasn't able to do that. So the second set of people that came to the house were a retired couple from Florida, and it was a cash buy. So, everything went through quickly, but there was one point when they were there looking at the house, we were signing the papers. They needed to rent it for 2 months and then come back so that we could do all of the mortgage stuff. But anyway,
Mhm.
they were coming down the stairs. The husband was coming down the stairs. The wife was coming down with him from the upper floor down to the landing. And I stepped out the front entry doors first, and I heard her say to him, why did you push me?
Oh, jeez.
And he said, I didn't push you. I'm 3 steps back from you. I can't even reach you from
Right.
where I'm at. I did not push you. And she says, yes, you did. And he said, no, I didn't push you. And she says, well, I don't know what happened then. So I did, because the
Mhm.
wolf type demon that was in the house dominated the locks on the door. It was the one that was playing the games with the locks. It was also would be the one that was in the hallway pushing people, pulling hair, and those sorts of things. Then there was this gargoyle looking type monkey thing in there too. And then the young man. So when they came out, conscious wise, I couldn't do to them what I had done to me, even though I understood,
Sure.
So I said to them, I said, do you believe in ghosts? And they said, nope, we are Baptist. We don't discuss those sorts of things. We don't entertain those sorts of things. We do not believe that we are protected. And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
I let it go at that point. I would have told them the truth if they had
Yeah.
wanted it, but they didn't want to hear it. So we went ahead and the house was sold, and I ended up driving past the house accidentally. I was going down the interstate from South Carolina to North Carolina, and there was a backup on I-26. So I darted off the exit, which just so happened to be the exit to that house. And I'm trying to find another way to get back on the interstate, and ended up having to pass where they were living. And lo and behold, there was a for sale by owner sign 6 months later in the front yard.
Oh.
Yeah, I kid you not. And I actually, in order to make sure that it was I turned down the street. I was curious because at first I had passed the street and I saw a sign in the yard, but I wasn't sure what it was. It could have been a vote for me kind of thing. So I came back and I turned down the street and I turned my radio off. I wanted to be as inconspicuous as possible. And I noticed that then it was a for sale by owner sign. And of course, my heart just dropped at that point because I had hoped,
Mhm.
for better
Yeah.
things for them. And then I turned around at the end of the street and came back by. But as I was crossing by the house the second time, my radio turned on full blast all by itself in my car. Full blast. I couldn't get it to turn off. I couldn't get it to turn down. I left that street so fast at that stop sign, I left skid marks because I
Oh,
didn't want
jeez.
people coming out to see whose radio was blaring and have them recognize me. I felt, terrible. So, but that's what the story is about, is Omnipresent. The sequel to it, Omnipresent What Happened Next, is coming out on the 25th of this month. I have a third book, The Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. It's a beautiful story about crossing over. And from a medical standpoint, I've been a nurse for many, many years, how the body transitions. And because of my ability to see interdimensionally and to see these types of beings, I was given the opportunity to glimpse into the other side as the veil faced and loved ones came forward. So that is what that book is about. I've been a nurse 17 years of the many years that I've been a nurse. It's been in geriatrics and end of life care, and I've seen a lot of people pass away. I've seen a lot of beautiful things happen at the time of passing away, and I'm hoping that book will empower people in a sense that they're not afraid of death and dying anymore, because there's a beautiful window that people miss when they have a loved one passing, where they can actually communicate with the other side. And because they're so afraid of Aunt Joe talking about Uncle Mickey, who's in the room, that died 5 years ago, that they freak out. So they get scared. And of course that shoves they can't come forward when you're scared, because you'll make you more scared.
Right.
So, they miss that opportunity of that window, and they think that their aunt's hallucinating, so they get the drugs. It's like, no, don't get the drugs. Ask her, ask her something, and ask her Uncle Joe where he put his hat that you couldn't find, and hey, and he can probably tell you through her, or said hello, and they can come back and say hello. Oh, you have a nice shirt on. I like that blue color on you. It's a beautiful time that you have that so many people miss because they're in the grieving and the loss. But if they could read this book and see what happens, I'm hoping that it brings a lot of comfort to people with terminal illness or that have lost someone.
I would definitely love to have you back on the show here, the interview process with me when that book comes out. That sounds very interesting. It's something that we've been talking about quite a bit in these OPUS online support group, so in the past, and and I'm sure it's going to be coming up again. And there's been a lot of talk about near-death experiences, and consciousness, and how that doesn't disappear. That consciousness goes out, and it's out there, and probably reincarnates. I've got some stories I could tell you too, but I want to just say, after all of this happened to you and your family, you basically left that house and then never had any other issues in the single wide or anything, and never was able to resolve what was happening at that house.
No, nothing cleared. Now, during one of the, I had an Indian lady come in, and of course, her reviews were very, very bizarre, but they were bizarre enough that I understood them because of the situation that I was in. It was a bizarre situation. So really, her way out there-ness is what made more sense to me than anybody else. So the young man was released. The young man, she at one point during the, when she came in the clearing, the wolf thing presented at the top of the stairs, and I'm like, wow, and she's like, oh, well, you did say that he had big feet. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, can you see that? And she's like, yeah. And the guy standing next to me that she brought with her could see it too. And she said, go and open the sliding glass door. And she said, I'm going to call the young man and give him the opportunity to leave. And when I opened that sliding glass door, that young man ran past me into the light so fast. He was anxious to go because, he had hung himself in the house. I really think that those demons being in there were part of the reason why he did, feeding on. The next door neighbors say there was a little bit of drugs going on with the kid, but still, they can exacerbate a situation. And, and he was, and I had enough time in the house too, to say, hey, I know you're here. You're dead, and you're going to get the opportunity to cross over. You haven't done anything bad enough not to, given. So, when you have this opportunity, you need to take it, because you could be stuck forever if you don't. And I hope that that also helped, but he did, he ran. So the two demons were left with each other at that house. Unfortunately, I'd like to think the reason I went through all of that was to free that young man's soul. So, and
Do you think the demons, there was another reason why they were there? You had mentioned earlier about the house was built on something, perhaps that was a problem.
Yes, when the Indian lady came over, she said that if the house had been built over 3 feet from where it was, that it would not be haunted. She said that there was like a tunneling, is what she said, of almost like ley lines or something that comes off of the ley lines that aren't actually on the maps of the ley lines that it was connected with, and that when they built the house, that the corner part of it and along the side kind of broke into that. And when it broke into that, it enabled things to come up into the house. And just one other thing, that fireplace downstairs, it was a natural stone fireplace. And of course, they can amplify off of emotions, fuse boxes, off of anything natural stone or that sort of thing. And when my son had a friend come over, they were playing video games down there, and my son had left the room briefly to get something to drink. The young man was sitting on the fireplace stoop, the little thing, because we didn't have furniture there yet. And he said that when my son left the room, that a light shot at him in the chest and laid him back. His head was in that fireplace. And he said, as he looked up into the chimney, or whatever you call it, the flue, I guess you would call it.
Yeah,
that there was a triangular thing above him, luminous. It was a triangular thing just hovering over his head up into that chimney, and he was stuck. He said he could only move his eyeballs. I mean, he couldn't move anything.
He was paralyzed. Paralyzed.
And he was awake when it happened. And all of a sudden, my son comes down the stairs and gets to the bottom of the stairs, and his friend is released, and his friend is saying to me, my son, yeah, did you see that? My son's like, see what? He wasn't in the room. So
yeah.
Friend didn't bother to mention that happened until I started talking about the story, and then he came forward and said what had happened to him in the house that way. So, and it was on that corner that they said that there might have been some tunneling. And the thing is the way that she talked about the tunneling as she stood in my front yard is she said, I bet that house over there is haunted and the one behind it is haunted too. She was right. The house that was catty corner to me had renters, and literally in the 8 months that I owned the house, they had 3 sets of people in there.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah, and the house behind it had been foreclosed on. It was sitting there empty. It had been empty for years, but you could tell it just had that vibe about it, passing by, that it probably, was. But it just, I believe that she was right that way, that they do some form of tunneling. They travel that way between the veils, between the inner dimensions. I believe that Bigfoot does the same thing. I believe the aliens use the veil also to disguise behind, which is a whole nother story with a patient that I believe was alien, because they kept visiting her room. And while and I would see them, and they didn't know I could see them, but they were like literally standing behind her like an old-fashioned switchboard operator, pulling things out and plugging things in on her. And this happened like 5 times, where over and over again, I would walk into the room, they would be there. They didn't think I could see them. I acted like I couldn't, but I couldn't get my blood pressure. I had like a battery operated blood pressure cuff. Did I lose you?
You're back.
I had a battery operated blood pressure cuff, fully charged. And every time I would go in her room and they were there, it would die. I ended up having to take her blood pressure manually. I just automatically started carrying a manual blood pressure cuff down there, with me, because anything that I took in the room when those things would show up, which they weren't there all the time, but when they did show up, my phone would die, my blood pressure cuff would die, my pulse oximeter would die.
These are so common connections between when people talk about aliens and now spirits, demons, ghosts, what have you, that you've encountered. There's this, I think all of these things are connected, and
I agree with you.
And I tell you what, we're at the end of the time frame we've got here. So I just want you to let the people know how they can get your book and how they can connect, because I think it's really important that people have access to what you've put out there.
Okay, I just plugged you in because my phone was dying, so I'm sorry if I'm jumping
Okay.
around here. Yes, my website is www.lynnmonet.com. My books can be purchased securely through my website. It takes all forms of payment. My first book, Omnipresent, the one that we were talking about, is sold on Amazon. Also, it's all over everywhere. You can order at Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, everything. But the next two books that I have coming out, The Colors of Heaven, and also What Happened Next with Omnipresent What Happened Next, was also touches on drug addiction and mental illness and demonic possession. So it's a very interesting book as well. So they can be purchased through my website. Again, that's lynnmonet.com. And if you purchase them from me, you're guaranteed to get them. I've had a lot of scammers recently try to pose as me, so please don't get wrapped up in that. I won't be responsible for your book if you purchase it from somewhere else, because I don't have any way to know that you've even purchased it. So anyway, I am thrilled. I've had a great time. Thank you so much for having me. I would love to come back as soon as in December when the other one comes out.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, thank you so much. And I think your group is wonderful. I really am enjoying getting to go in, and I'm learning things from people, and I'm hoping that some of what I have to share is helping them as well. And yeah, you know, there are aliens and there are demons, and they both really exist. It's not all one way or the other. So it's interesting to hear the other side as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being on with me today. I want to thank our listeners. You know, as a nonprofit organization, we appreciate any donations that you can give us. We're at opusnetwork.org. There's a donate button right on the homepage, and you know, please go out there and buy Lynn's book. I think you're going to get a tremendous amount out of it. I've learned a lot today. I've never really dug into the demon aspects of this particular type of phenomena. And so I think it's, again, points to the fact that all these things are connected. And also I have to do a little bit of advertising my own. I have a book out there these days called The Unknown Other and the Existential Proposition of Alien Contact. And the forward is by Linda Moulton House. So you can get that right on our website. On that first page that you come to, the homepage, there's a picture of the book, and you just click on that and takes you right to good old Amazon. And we're an affiliate of Amazon, so any sales that are done on our site, we also get a commission, a small commission for that. Again, Lynn, thank you so much for being here.